Welcome back to Cool Running Chess, guys, and today we're going to be talking about tunnel vision. Are you playing your games and just be winning, and sometimes you just see your opponent just take a piece and you didn't know what happened? That's because sometimes you're struggling with tunnel vision, and sometimes lower rated players, especially ones between 14 to 1500 rated, always struggle with tunnel vision. Sometimes Grandmaster can struggle with tunnel vision as well. Sometimes it happens to the best of us, right? So today we're going to be a quick fix to stop tunnel vision. So the first quick fix is you have to ask yourself, what is my opponent's piece? That's the first thing. And that's how you kind of stop and limit yourself from tunnel vision of focusing on one position too long. Usually tunnel vision is when your brain is very much focused and locked in on a certain position that you forget about the rest of the board. You can't forget about the rest of the board. You can't be playing for only yourself. Okay, so that's the first fix. Ask yourself these questions. What is my opponent's piece doing? What is it threatening? The second fix is talk about your candidate moves. Don't only plan one move ahead. Plan at least 3 moves ahead. That's the least amount of moves you should plan ahead. At least 3. And the last one is remember CCT. Checks, captures, and threats just in that order. You always have to look on your checks first, your captures and threats, and not only for yourself but for your opponent as well. So that's how we kind of limit our tunnel vision. So now we have to look at how it would apply the game. So usually 1400 rated players do not know what to do with tunnel vision, and we're going to look at the game here. So in this position, it's white, black to move, and white last move is knight e2. So you have to say to yourself, what is knight e2 doing? And yes, it is attacking the rook on d4. So that is the easy way. And you realize we're only not focused on what we do because black is obviously putting some pressure on the queen side, and obviously black is the one that's trying to attack on white is trying to attack black's king side. Right. So in this position, black just played the simple move. Rook to d2, getting the rook to a safe square, which is the most important thing, and putting pressure on the e2 knight, also putting pressure on the b2 pawn. Remember in our planning video we said always put your piece on active squares. Okay, so now white has the tunnel vision because white is super focused on this pawn on f6 that he's putting pressure on. But black has that pawn kind of covered with his king and queen, so white can't really get to it as yet. But white played the move pawn to g5. Pawn to g5. Why is pawn to g5 bad? Pawn to g5 bad is because you're just dropping the knight. You're just losing the knight. And this doesn't really work because your opponent has too many pieces right now. And your on white is already done in exchange, as you can see in the position. So giving away more pieces unless unless you're getting some very unstoppable checkmate, it doesn't really make any sense in this position right now. But pawn to g5 is a bad move. What white should have done, this move is just planning towards one move ahead, right? But what white should have done is plan candidate moves at least 3 moves ahead. So the first move should have been knight to g3 with the idea of going to f5 for the king and the queen, or to play the knight to h5 to apply another attacker to the pawn at f6. Because the pawn at f6 right now is kind of weak. That should have been white's plan. And that's just a 2-move plan because black king isn't really, it can't move away from the defender of the f6 pawn because white would just simply capture. Black king can't move because white would just simply capture the pawn f6, putting pressure on the queen, also on the f7 pawn, and white's queen can start coming down on the eighth rank, and start putting some pressure on the black king. But white played the move pawn to g5, so now black has to think ahead. Can you capture the pawn? Why would you capture? The great GM Igor Smirnov says to take is a mistake, right? So we don't want to take. Because if takes, let's look at take. If captures, you have queen captures check, and look at this now. Tunnel vision would have let you not see that your rook is going to be hanging after the queen takes back on g5. It's not that taking is super bad. It is bad because you're going to lose a pawn. The king has to remove the f6 pawn was kind of shielding your king. Okay, but just because you take, it's no longer shielding your king. As soon as your king steps to e8, probably the queen will take the rook, but also the queen can play queen to g8 check, sending the king back up, and now the rook is open, and you're going to probably get checkmated, or you're going to drop more than the rook in this position. So this is very bad. You can't take right there. So you have to think about it. Do I need to take? No, you just take the knight. The knight is free. You don't want the knight to become active and become something in the position later on. So you just took the knight. Now, white has a couple of options here. White can take the pawn with the rook and can take with the pawn. So let's look at the one with the pawn first. If white captures with the pawn check, you have to say to yourself, where can I go? Okay, you can't really capture back because you're going to lose your queen and you're just going to lose the game. So you can't capture back. So you don't want to go to d7, and d7, a lot of 14 to 1500 rated players would have went to d7. Why? Because it looks safe to them. White is not close as yet. White is not attacking their f7 pawn. They only play up to c1 check, and they see that their king can escape and run all the way to this corner. But why is it bad? Because once the king goes to d7, the queen comes to g4, and we still end up in this fork and losing the rook. Yes, even though we won the knight, and the game would have been back. It would have been back equal 2, 4, 6. No, you would have been down couple pawns. It's bad for you. Okay, so now this is not the position that you want, but you just simply can go to king to e8, and if the queen comes to h8, you can block the queen check with queen to f8 and trade, because your materials you would want to trade, and that is just the end of white's crazy plan. Okay, but white didn't take with the pawn, so white took with the rook. Why did white take with the rook? White wants the queen to move, to then try and move g6, pawn to g6. Pawn to g6 does, it is opening the line for the rook, for the queen, and the queen and the rook will now be on this diagonal, which is not safe. Also is putting another attacker on the pawn on f7, and your black is going to be in a lot of trouble. So that's what white saw in the position. The tunnel vision is there. It's just like this. They're only seeing what's ahead of them. They don't care about what's on the other side of the board. But black, they forgot that black is still playing the game. You can't only think about your plan alone. Black is still in the game. So black responded, rook c1 check, and this is just game over, right? Because the rook on e2 is cutting off the king, and this is almost staircase. But white still can come back. White black blocks the check, rook to f1. Now you need to find the best move here for black. What is the best move here for black? Yes, the best move here for black is queen to c5 or queen to b6. Any one of them works, because it's checking the king on g1, and the king is the only protector or defender of the rook on f1. And once the king, and it's basically removing the guard, once the king moves to h1, you'll be able to capture the rook on f1 with checkmate. And once the queen goes to c5 or b6, if the white queen comes back to block, check. The white queen comes back to block the attack. You just simply capture queen with check. And once the king goes here, queen captures the rook captures the rook. Queen to g2 or queen to h2 is going to be a simple checkmate. So now you realize how tunnel vision stops you guys from gaining either. What you need to do with tunnel vision is remember we have 3 steps, three fix. You just one, ask yourself, what is my opponent doing? 2, don't only look on one move, don't only plan one move ahead. Look at all your candidate moves. Don't only look on one move that you have in your head. Look on at least 3 moves ahead. Look at all the rest of your candidate moves. And the last one is CCT. Remember your checks, captures, and threats. That's it, guys. Remember to like, share, and subscribe.